No, don't record yet. Because it does that now. Nope.
In the year 5 million BC, something came from Mars.
What's that?
Some like locusts, I guess.
Inago. It's inago in Japan. I've eaten them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you eaten inago?
Not like prepared properly. I've eaten it for like a prank.
Oh, okay. No, if you don't know, this is most of my students say they haven't had it, but it's cooked locust with soy on them. We went to a restaurant, like a countryside restaurant once, and the nice old couple like served it to us as like service, like the free thing. And my daughter was 2 at the time, was just sitting there like eating it. It was like a Hammer film.
Yeah, that does sound pretty Hammer film.
Like today's, it actually didn't taste bad. It's just like, 1, it's a bug, and 2, you get like the legs in your teeth, and that's
when I ate bugs. That's what I had. They were in my mouth for like a week.
Okay. This is Matt.
This is Luke.
Welcome to the Sci-Fi Sanctuary. It is a Hammer film today. You're gonna say it because I keep mispronouncing it.
Quatermass and the Pit.
There we go. Thank you. I don't want money, man. I want quarters. Actually, I don't want money. That's why I don't have much money. But today, this was actually a guest suggestion from returning guest who has written a bunch of books on the occult. Lots of interesting, like mind trips of books. Ken, Ammi, hello, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again. And unlike the previous movie we reviewed, this one I thoroughly enjoyed. So
there we go.
Hurrah!
I enjoyed it, except I was eating curry when the Martian locust aliens were disintegrating, and that wasn't like an awesome match. Right. No, I was eating chicken. I was eating chicken with like some kind of like sauce on it. And just it seemed somewhat similar.
I think I'd finished eating my dinner before anything gross happened.
That's unfortunate timing.
Yeah. So Ken, I guess our first question for you is, have you ever eaten a bug? We have.
Purposefully? No.
Okay. What were you? Yours was prank. Mine was to be polite. Yours was bicycling. I've eten bugs that way.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, I've eaten many that way.
Yeah.
Or my eyes eating those. I don't like the eye bug. But, as far as this movie, I've seen it around for years. I remember, around year 2000 when I was looking at interesting DVDs. I go by like the box art. Like, that looks cool. I want to see it. I'd always see this one and never quite pick it up. I'm not sure why. I guess, I don't know. Maybe it seemed a little dry and I wanted psychedelic, though this does have some psychedelics. So you don't miss out on that. But Ken, where'd this one come into your life? Because again, this is your suggestion today.
Well, first of all, something that you mentioned already, which is I thought as well that it's Quatermass. And I wrote an entire review of this movie referring to Quatermass. And then at the end, I was just quoting some stuff. And I thought, they just misspelled this. It's not. And then I looked it up. It is not Quatermass. Because I thought it was like a Britishism, Quatermass, don't you know? But it's Quater. So that blew me away. And by the way, in the UK, it's Quatermass in the Pit, and the US is called 5 million years to Earth.
That's because those Yankees can't handle the word Quatermass.
I was going to suggest Matt just call it that to keep himself out of trouble.
Yeah, and I might do that all night, who knows? But the way, I don't know exactly how I ran into it, but as I've mentioned before with you guys, is I'm writing a series of books reviewing movies with UFO and alien themes, and so I've kind of been looking everywhere I could think of, any year, decade, I don't really care. And somehow I ran across it. And of course, in the UK, Quatermass has been a TV series, from the old black and white days. And then it's been a series of movies, some that were multi-part. And this one really struck a chord with me. And it has every theme that comes up time and time and time again in alien and UFO movies, regardless of what year they're from. And I'll put it this way, the technocratic unholy trinity is high-tech, evolution, and the occult. Those 3 elements are absolutely unavoidable whenever I'm looking into transhumanism, aka futurism or post-humanism, and in alien and UFO movies. It's like essentially inevitable. And this movie has all those three features in it as well. So I was fascinated, but I do find myself making the same points over and over again as I write movie reviews about this stuff, just over and over. It's incredible.
Yeah, I guess my first impression, actually, this is a very, I guess it's not quite as straight up horror as the completely quintessential Hammer film, but it follows that Hammer film thing where it has like fantastic atmospherics. It's a little slow, but it seems smart. And then the last 20 minutes, it just goes like nuts. So, which is, I guess, pretty much the normal Hammer film trajectory. So this is a very nice representation of that studio. I'm probably coming a little more from the caught film perspective, where, you know, this one is, yeah, Hammer Films is a certain standard. You know, my dad grew up constantly telling me about how traumatized he was by Christopher Lee's horror of Dracula, you know, and it was hard to find. It took us like 5 years to find it on VHS in the late 80s. So,
well, growing up in the UK, I was very aware of the TV serials of Quatermass, because they would often get mentioned in like Doctor Who magazine and stuff. But I don't think I even knew that the Hammer films existed. Or maybe I just conflated the two in my head. So when you said we were watching Quatermass in the Pit, I was expecting the black and white 1950 TV one.
Yeah, there is. This story is in a 1950s.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know, yeah. Oh, like the three Quatermass TV shows then became the three Quatermass movies. But yeah, so I was kind of pleasantly surprised when it was color and like a little more fast-paced and exciting than I was expecting. Because I knew vaguely the plot, and it'd always been meaning to watch it, because digging up aliens that have been there for a long time is one of my favorite tropes. Like the Thing or a lot of the Lovecraft stuff, that's right up my alley.
Yes, it's basically the ancient aliens.
Yeah.
Like the original ancient alien theme is all over a lot of the movies.
This is a different media, but it kept flashing through my mind. Well, two things flashed through my mind. If you looked at my notes, I was like, there are weird similarities with Ghostbusters here. I mean, I know this is like way earlier, but I'm just like, certain parts of the plot really like made me keep thinking of Ghostbusters.
I guess it's like the hodgepodge together science that the authorities don't believe in.
Yeah. That we got our water pet character and all that in the form of the defense minister. And the other one is, it was an episode of The Simpsons, a little past their prime, where they dig up the like angel thing.
Oh, I remember that one. Yeah.
And it turns out to be a hoax. And at the time, it's like, ha, that's funny. It was a hoax. But now you're like, well, how much of this stuff like has, maybe it's not like this fantastic thing that, you know, like in this case, you know, alien Martian locusts that tried to reprogram genetics, you know, maybe that's a too wide a picture, but there could be a certain thing to it when you find like a giant bone in the ground, you know. I'm using the archaeological sense of the word.
Well, I always think like maybe most of our legends of dragons just come from people finding dinosaur bones.
Yeah, possibly, or experiencing them in, you know, like trances, right?
Yes, well, you know, I've written quite a few books on issues of Nephilim and quote unquote giants. And that's definitely a theme I've had to touch upon time and time again, which is when an ancient person found a huge bone, they weren't exactly qualified to determine that it was human versus dinosaur or pachyderm or whale. And there's a researcher, I believe she's a sociologist, who gave a really interesting example of, let's say an ancient person found the skeleton of a pachyderm, like a mammoth.
That's exactly the one I thought you were going to go for, yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly your Greek Cyclops.
Right, exactly. So what would they do? They would lay it out on the ground. So it's a two-dimensional surface, right? Now, that means you don't have to bother with all this stuff like in modern day museums where you have to actually reconstruct the bones so that they're functional. You're just laying them flat. So that simplifies everything. And then you would have the skull with a hole in the center. That's for a trunk. But if you didn't know that, you would think that's an eye hole. And there you go. You have a giant cyclops. So that is something to be very, very aware of. And it explains a lot of things. And I have tracked down in my books some of the old, we always hear about old newspaper accounts of giants being found. And the ones I've been able to find that any follow-up was done on, they do turn out to be pachyderm or whale or dinosaur or something like that.
Yeah, I know in the States when they find these things, a lot of them are just thrown into the Smithsonian warehouse to be forgotten about, Raiders of the Lost Ark style. Then you'll find things in, like little local museums that are relatively unverifiable, but those museums are, hella fun to visit. So,
Right.
They're more like a sideshow.
Yeah. I especially love the mystery spots where they're like, oh, the laws of physics break down here, but they just built the room at like a weird angle. And then there's one, I haven't been to the one in California. That's the one that supposedly is like the really cool one. I went to one in Kentucky that was like just totally an entertaining sham. So
At the end, did it turn out that all the dinosaur bones were just like marketing to get you to want chicken wings, or
something like that? Yeah. No, I want chicken wings. Yeah,
I always want chicken wings. Better than bugs.
Before we get too far, shall we go ahead and plow into the plot? Yeah, I made Luke write it like on the fly because like no, this one has to be in like a British accent. I can't do it.
Okay, I'm gonna go for like my strongest accent I can do then.
Okay, this is the Colonel Brean accent.
Engineers on the London Underground accidentally uncover some fossilized skulls. Archaeologists are called in and they accidentally uncover a metal object, possibly an unexploded bomb. The army are called in and they accidentally discover a huge mysterious rocket. Colonel Bream is called in and accidentally discovers a mysterious alien spacecraft. Professor Quatermass tags along and accidentally discovers a 5 million-year-old Martian plot to genetically engineer life on Earth and brainwash us into using psychic powers to perform ethnic cleansing. Quatermass and the archaeologists put a stop to that right quick with a big metal stake through the heart of the alien machine.
I think I would have punched you now. That's the punchable accent, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the accent that you threw our tea in the water for.
So basically, some work is being done in the London Underground, basically what we would call a subway stop.
A tube.
And they find a skull, and so the scientists are called in, and of course you have the typical debate about, well, let's just get the stuff out of here so we can finish our work, but they keep finding more things, and then they end up finding objects, some kind of thing that they first interpret to be a World War era bomb, and tell us the name of that bomb. At least the nickname of the bomb they suspected it was, they called it a Satan.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Sorry.
I did catch that early on, but yeah.
V2.
Yeah, it was a real slang for that kind of bomb back in the day. But it's also very in keeping with the plot of the movie.
Yeah.
Because also you'll recall that particular underground station is Hob, right? And then it is specifically noted that it used to be HOB. It is now HOBB, but it used to be HOB, which we're told was once a sort of nickname for the devil.
I was thinking, I guess that's where like hobgoblin comes from.
Okay. I was like, is that a thing?
Yeah, I think it is a thing.
Okay.
You know how quaint and stupid British words sound sometimes.
It's just a hob.
But so instantly we have, at this stage of the movie, very early on, you just something, okay, well, that's kind of odd. But we do find that there ends up being this correlation between paranormal phenomena that's been happening in that area for decades, if not longer. No, centuries, actually. Centuries.
Yeah, because they're finding medieval texts and stuff.
Yes. So that was part of the interesting ancient aliens aspect, is that you have this concept of this craft that for some odd reason, those aliens, boy, they always forget the little things like filling up with gasoline or petrol, and so they're stuck on Earth, and for centuries that it's like a hub of paranormal activity. So that's one interesting aspect of this movie, is that it seeks to explain paranormal activity as having something, we don't know what yet, something to do with whatever this thing is.
So this is definitely a tangent. What's the most paranormal place you folks have been to?
Oh,
Been to a place where it just felt quite paranormal. I'll start because that's a question you got to think about. Two. One's in Japan, which is
Forest?
Kuruma.
Is it the forest?
It's north of Kyoto. You take a train about 30 minutes. You hike up a mountain. There's a tree that's split, and that's there's a Shinto legend. That's the source of creation.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool. And then there's a temple, and you can go down, and it's a catacomb. and it was just like the creepiest place I've ever been. So that's more of, that's probably more of a mind trick. The other one where I just felt it kind of permeating in the walls is the notorious ghost town in the States of Charleston, South Carolina. You feel weirdness kind of permeating around there. Again, they have ghost tours and stuff. There's a psychosomatic element there too, but just this is a place that feels kind of creepy. So
yeah, I've got two as well. I went. Me and my girlfriend at the time were looking for an apartment in the UK, and we went and looked at one that was in a converted old mental asylum. And it just, like, they were just like weird unnecessary locks here and doors there, and we just walked into it, and she's like, "Luke, we're not living here, this place is haunted." I was like, yeah, I kind of feel it.
You have to pay the first month's rent, the last month's rent, utilities, and the Phantasmagoria comes free.
Yeah. And then the other one that always gets me, because I like to go just hiking up on random mountains around here in Japan, sometimes I find myself coming down once it's dark, and it's just like a little, very small, insular Japanese village, and it's just like these really old buildings, a little old lady staring at me as I walk past. There's a mysterious looking shrine. I start getting horror movie vibes whenever I'm up there.
Oh, I make that my normal holiday time walk, man.
Yeah, but it's
familiar
it's
surroundings. It's
fine in the day.
No,
when I find myself in one of them at night, and I've never been there before. Yeah,
but it's familiar surroundings. Right. I do these walks all the time. So yeah. Ken, you got a creepy place?
I suppose one place is a local cemetery where there's basically two halves. There's the new half that is nice and upkept, grass and everything is really nice and done up. And then there's the old half that goes maybe back to the 1700s, which is it's just dirt and old, really interesting looking tombstones. But it's I've been there at night, and it's kind of an interesting feel. Otherwise, I would say, I think maybe when I was in Israel, and not only really because here in America, I mean, you might go to a place that's 300 years old, perhaps. In Israel, you're walking around places that are millennia old, millennia. And just to think about the number of things that have happened there, the number of people that have been through there. Or being up in Masada, we climbed Masada, where just to not be captured by Romans, a bunch of Jews committed suicide. That was a pretty interesting place, especially because we woke up before sunrise and we climbed up to the top to watch the sunrise from there. So, I mean, I would say it's not like I had any kind of experiences, but maybe those two places stand out.
When you were telling about the first one, I was thinking like, yeah, that's America, because in the UK, the new side would go back to the 1700s and 1800s.
Yeah.
We fielded that question not too long ago about Japan, where we do have these old places, but they get rebuilt pretty regularly because they're all built out of wood, and they just do that. You'll often see in Japan where they're just taking down a building. Like, why are you taking that down? That looks like classic, but that's what they do.
There's a lot of superstition about continuing to live in a place where someone's died.
Or where a family lived in Japan, people do not want to move into a house that has been previously lived in. They'll demolish that house. They'll build a new one. So.
What's interesting is in the housing complex where I live, I watched my house be built up from when it was dirt to a frame till it was a house. The complex was that new. And my neighbor across the street, when his house wasn't even done being built yet, there was a small fire in it. No big deal, okay, but they're Filipino, and he said, "Oh, my family, they got this superstitious thing about fire." And I was like, no, you should feel good about this. I mean, do you know what statistically the chances are that anything like that will ever happen again to you? You're set. This is good news. It's pre-disastered, as they said in The World According to Garp movie. It's pre-disastered, right? You got it over with. You're done.
My heart was stopped for a second because I was like, is this where the story ends? Or do they all move in and it bursts down again? So I'm glad that was the ending there, yeah.
It's a happy ending.
So we'll get it's still a tangent, but I guess we'll get a little more underground. I was reading not long ago, just in the Philippines, where they do have areas of the cities where it's like they again bring up catacombs and people living there. So it's like a necropolis, but people also live there and have shops and stuff. And it was a pretty wild article to look at. So just, kind of fascinating. Have you seen that?
Nope.
No, yeah. If anyone's, it was just a really interesting, I don't remember where I read it, unfortunately, but I was like, wow, people live like that, and that's crazy.
Well, quite a few of the sci-fis we've watched seem to think we're all going to live underground eventually.
Yeah,
which I'm not a big fan.
Here they're not underground. It's kind of like an outdoor mausoleum, but since the city is relatively crowded, people are also inhabiting those areas, right. And it's become like this whole culture. But anyway, my question in the first place is all just to get to the point that the atmospherics of this cinematic place in Quatermass is it's really cool. A very cool, creepy sci-fi vibe,
I really like the way they tied it into. They made their bug so that in silhouette it looks like the devil.
Yeah.
And he can say like, "Oh, doesn't that look like a gargoyle? Doesn't that look like every devil you've ever seen?"
Then we get that nice.
And you get the payoff right at the end when we see the big smoky one. Yeah.
I guess we're designing already, but we should give a few shout outs to a few of the actors since we tend to do that. The one, of course, that I noticed most is Barbara Shelley, because she is a regular of these Hammer films. Mm-hmm. I think she's in the aforementioned Horror of Dracula. And you don't happen to have the wiki out, do you?
No, because I turned my phone off so it wouldn't.
Oh, right. That makes sense. Anyway, I know the lead of this. Here we go. The lead of the film is actually not Andrew Keel, who's playing Quatermass, but is the other doctor, Dr. Ronys, James Donald, who I just noticed because I had seen this film way back when, that he plays Theo Van Gogh in Lust for Life, which is kind of a interesting one. Seems like he was in Bridge on the River Kwai, Great Escape, so I guess that's why he got top billing.
Dr. Ronys, at the end, when that locust phantasm manifests over Hobbs, he says it's Satan. He identifies it as the devil. So even there, it's not just that we're thinking, well, that's kind of like this shape with horns. The antennas kind of look like horns. It's like they're making that correlation for us.
All through the film, yeah.
No, it said when they were getting the rating certification, they were like, oh, that's too satanic. We're going to give us like an X rating just because of the level of Satanism. They were like, or no. When they were going over their script, they're like, if you make this film, it's going to get a high rating because it's so explicitly satanic in its imagery. So
times have changed.
Yeah. Now you go.
It was like animated DreamWorks movies, which probably got Satan in them.
Right.
I was actually impressed by, I've forgotten her name. Was it Barbara?
Yeah, the actress and the character is Barb.
She wasn't playing like a typical scream queen damsel for most of the film. Yeah, like, there wasn't really a scene where she's just like, oh, I need saving at any point.
Yeah, watching a role like that where the female or actor has like agency in the film, it's like, wow, that's pretty wild for the 60s.
Yeah, and I like the moment where it didn't work on Quatermass, he had to put it on her. Yeah. She was the one who was connected and stuff.
Right, she is a styled assistant to Dr. Ronys, so she is in the sciences to some degree. And then, yeah, it does turn out that she's able to do some things that are not. And then I would say that she essentially turns into what I would term the Scarlet Woman, which, I don't know, it's some kind of deep occultic thing tying to what the Book of Revelation calls the Whore of Babylon. Supposedly some kind of entity woman that you can summon for occult purposes. And especially there's one point at the end where she is walking down the street, like basically in a hypnotic state, as many of them are by the end of the movie, and she is literally wearing all red. And then when, again, we're kind of jumping all over the timeline of this movie, but when Quatermass 2 falls for this hypnotic state, these paranormal abilities that interacting with these, even though they're dead, these locusts, even Quatermass succumbs to it. And so there's a scene where it's basically alchemical, where his masculinity and her femininity kind of meet, and they're able to pull each other out of this thing. In fact, he knocks her out with a punch at one point, you might recall.
Yeah, that's a Captain Kirk move.
But if nothing else, this is definitely like a very sharp movie. It kind of, I guess it does need, you watched it 2 nights ago?
Last night in the end.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like it does need a little bit of time to stew before it really takes form. It needs to simmer a bit, you know?
Right.
Just when you watch, you're like, okay, that happened. And you're like, oh, well, hey, this all fit together really nice, you know?
Yeah, it does a really good job of being like technically a sci-fi, but just dealing in occult imagery and tropes in a way that it still has that like horror witchcrafty vibe.
Yeah,
Well, see, in a way, that is the Quatermass character, because there's a bifurcation between the government and the military personnel who are just strictly secular, essentially, in a manner of speaking. They're all just say, this is a military weapon, this is a bomb, this was done by an army, there's nothing to see here, folks. And Quatermass, who is a scientist and a serious one, but he's willing to follow the evidence where it leads, even when it's leading him to very odd places where he's basically being denied the continuation of funding for his projects and everything else that he has to suffer because he's saying, no, this is what it is. This is what it is. These are actually alien entities.
Well, and that's a truer depiction of what science should be than what you see in a lot of films. Because science is a set of, methodology to find the truth. It shouldn't be dogmatic. Whereas often science is depicted as like, oh, no, it couldn't be anything fantastical. I believe in science.
Right. It's like crossing the line from skeptical to cynical. Right. It should be skeptical. But when you cross it, okay, so skeptic would say, I won't believe until. Whereas cynic would say, I won't believe, period.
Whatever you show me, yeah.
So that's the interesting part about the Quatermass character, is he's kind of going in between both of those worlds and just trying to expose what's really happening there, even to his own peril.
I was reading that the guy who played him said he was actually quite unhappy making this film. He was convinced that the writer wanted a different actor. And the writer was like, no, I didn't want one at all. No, maybe it's the director wanted a different actor. And he's like, I didn't even know he's unhappy at the time. I'd try to make him happier. But maybe I wonder if that actually kind of serves the performance, because there's kind of a weird curmudgeonness, mixed with, optimism and a fervor for the truth.
Yeah.
Well, because the Quatermass of the black and whites was a different actor than the Quatermass of these movies.
Yeah, even the first two, I believe, have a different actor. So
he
only played Quatermass in this one.
And I think in the 90s he did a radio version where it was a new story.
Well, there's also a 3-part movie that he starred in. A 3-part Quatermass movie. Another interesting one correlated to the occult, where there's alien goings on at places that are like a Stonehenge type area.
Okay.
But anyhow, in the notes, someone wrote, he's like the esoteric Columba with more facial hair.
Oh, yeah. He kind of stumbles into the scene. And...
One more thing.
Yeah, one more thing. That sort of thing.
And then that he would make a fantastic guest for Coast to Coast AM.
Yes, of course he would. You know that one?
No.
Okay, that's an American one, but it's basically, it was a live radio. It is a live radio program since the 90s, where basically anyone, they'll have guests that are into this sort of esoteric or science stuff, or pseudoscience, if you want to use that term. But anyone can just call in and kind of like bring in their wild ideas.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the notes also say Quatermass is just a crazy old man now, for reals. Oh. And incidentally, in one of the 3-part movie, at one point he's made to realize, there's something he should have realized, but he didn't catch it. And he says, oh God, I'm too old. My brain's drying.
That's what I'm going to say next time I mess up in a class or something.
In all the scenes where it's, the classic scene where he's telling them what's going on, the army doesn't want to believe it. He does sound insane in this film, though. Like, I can see why they don't believe him. Because he jumps to these conclusions so fast.
But see, what's interesting, too, is the military explanation is also not just a denial.
Yeah.
But Brean actually makes a good case for his side. So he's been making a very irrational case until like the very, very end.
Oh yeah, when he
Yeah, once telekinesis enters the picture, it's time to consider the weird.
Well,
Brean's
so if
case
you
makes
remember,
a lot
if
more
you
sense with how
remember,
those bugs look.
Yeah.
well, if you remember at the very end, Brean ends up literally on his knees before the craft, as if in worship, and he's completely transfixed, and he essentially just melts into a puddle.
Yeah, I definitely remember that.
He doesn't actually melt; he just like burns, right? He's just that's it, and that's also very sort of Phoenix-like alchemical, where he's come to recognize the truth, and he has this moment of enlightenment, and that's it. He can just let go of his former personality and self, because that's all over with. He's experiencing a brand new reality, and he's completely given over to it.
Actually, I'm thinking of, last one we did, we were talking about the Warden and Clockwork, right? And then Brean is kind of the same character, but played, much more in an understated way, which, makes him seem more real too. So
pick that up and put it down properly.
Yeah, because
from Clockwork Orange.
I know. Brean could easily start doing that, but he didn't, and it makes for, again, this is a pretty smart movie, despite having some cheesy edges, which is appealing. I mean, honestly, if it was just fully smart and didn't have the weird cheesy effects and stuff, it wouldn't be as lovable.
So maybe let's pick it up where they're starting to dig out this thing, which is identified and told to the public to be a bomb, like a Satan. But then they're starting to find peculiar things about it, such as they can't even scratch it. They can't burn into it. They can't seem to open it. They can't seem to do anything until they go. Well, see, it's kind of hard to explain. It's almost like the Knight Rider car. It's just this object. I would imagine it's maybe 15 feet long, and there's a portion where you can go inside of it, but it's just a hollow, and they can't figure out, okay, what is this about? But there's a wall, so they're trying to break into it. Finally, they get a super high-tech drill, and they're drilling into it, and the reverberations are such that they're like losing their minds. It's just so overwhelming. And so they stop, they come out, and then they come back in. They find, oh, we did drill a hole into it. But then they realize actually we didn't, because the hole's bigger than the drill bit, and it seems like it's from the inside. And then that wall starts to crumble. And then you have this image, really fascinating image, multicolored, of what, look like insects. They're referred to as locusts, but they're like in these crystalline, if you could imagine maybe a beehive, but made of crystal, right?
Yeah, it's a real kaleidoscope.
That was fantastic design. And we shouldn't forget the sort of the tree of life symbology on that bulkhead. That was pretty wild.
Okay, so yeah, that was Quatermass claims that it is a Kabbalistic symbol and that it's a pentagram. It's definitely not a pentagram.
Yeah, I caught him saying that, and I was like, I must have misheard.
Oh, I misheard because I just said tree of life. Okay.
Well, yeah, there was just one of those movie things. Somewhere between the script and the design, someone botched it. Okay, but whatever. The point
maybe that
is,
was them trying to avoid that X rating for satanic imagery.
Perhaps, but the point is that they find they can't even scratch the thing, but there's this symbol scratched on it, and Quatermass identifies it as an occult symbol. So then, okay, you're wondering, what is an occult symbol doing on this thing that ends up being an alien craft? So there you go. And so once that the opening is made, they realize, okay, these locust things, which by the way, they're insectoid locusts, but they're like 3 feet long. So they're quite large. You'd have quite the meal in Japan with one of those, feed a whole family. But then the crystalline structure starts falling apart, and they're picking up these insectoid corpses to study them, but they're starting to melt. So everything's decaying because of the rush of oxygen. It just starts oxidizing everything instantly, and everything starts falling apart. So they're trying to learn as much as they can as soon as possible.
I was interested that you mentioned the spaceship was hollow. So I think the implication was this is just like the capsule that would have had a separate propulsion system.
But then they get into the idea that the
Yeah.
structure of the ship itself is...
What looks like a solid object to us is actually some incredibly powerful and magical technology we can't understand. Because even though the ship is just a solid piece of metal, it still has this psychic energy and projects these images and stuff.
Yeah, because they make it inside of the whatever the cavernous opening, the what you would think was a cockpit, and Quatermass says doesn't seem to lead through anywhere, and that there's no external propulsion unit. I don't see how they were controlled unless the missile itself did some of the thinking. So this is like extremely early artificial intelligence right here. And then they say this substance isn't inert, far from it. Because you would wonder how do insects build all this stuff, and it's almost like they didn't. It's almost like they had artificial intelligence that was able to do this. Of course, did they build the artificial intelligence? And that just gets into the whole mythology of where these locusts came from.
Yeah, they only really give us a taste of their society.
Yeah.
But it does seem like a pretty interesting alien race. I would have liked to see more. I don't think seeing more would have worked for this film. But as I understand, I think with Quatermass, each story is completely different, aliens and plot and stuff. But if they'd done it in such a way where the sequel was these guys again, I would have liked to have heard more.
So one way that they see more is because just coming into contact with this craft taps into whatever it is, human potential to have paranormal capabilities. And so with the usage of a helmet that was created by Dr. Ronys, they're able to visualize, literally put somebody's thoughts through a monitor, and they can watch the thoughts, right? And so they are able to capture some of the ancient history of this locust race. And mostly what we see is a time during their development when there was basically a cleansing, like a genocide, basically. And that's essentially what we see and how some of them ended up here on Earth doing that which they did.
It made me recall, and Ken, you might have seen this one, but last year we reviewed Color Out of Space, which had this sudden like burst of the alien homeworld imagery, and that one being a little more, CG and things, of course, but sort of made me think of that, just getting late in the movie, suddenly getting this like direct blast of the of the vision of the alien planet or whatever.
I really liked it when we were seeing just glimpses, like through the little screen on their device and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Once they gave us like a good minute of close-up footage, it did, look a bit like just playing with your action figures.
Yeah, it was pretty cheesy, but
yeah, I know.
I guess they sort of got away with it because you're watching it on a monitor that's black and white and really grainy, so it was purposefully done so it would look like you would kind of expect it to. But what they're saying is that the memories show a race purge, a cleansing of Martian hives, and that they were killing and being killed. I think we may have witnessed ritual slaughter to preserve a fixed society, to rid it of mutations. So this fascinating that they refer to it as a ritual, but that it also pertained to that some of the locusts had experienced mutations and they just wanted to get rid of them. Yeah.
Because then once, and this is jumping ahead a bit, once it starts happening to the humans as well, it seems they're hunting down anyone who doesn't have the psychic connection. Like anyone who's mutated away from what the Martians designed.
So they say that's the way they lived, and it's the way they intended their substitutes on Earth to live, that this stored memory of killing should be coupled with another power that thing in the pit seems to possess, the power to redirect human energy into a force beyond control. So that's what was happening to the humans when they were exposed to this phenomena for long enough. So like we mentioned before, the town above had experienced paranormal effects for centuries, but it seems like the closer you get to the actual object, the more of an effect that it would have on you. so that people came under its control, and they would be basically like hypnotized, and all of a sudden they had these powers like telekinesis, where they're when they identified a human being that didn't have these powers because they were not mutants, or they were mutant. I couldn't figure out which is which, but
Yeah.
they would like cause rocks to crash on them. They're literally murdering people who are different than they, just like happened back on Mars, but they're doing it mentally, right? They're causing all these events.
One thing I remember they'd mentioned, so every time some kind of digging got close to the craft was when the paranormal stuff happened. So in medieval times, they dug a well and started seeing the devil. And then when they first built the underground station, they were seeing them. And then this time they expanded the underground station and saw it again. So it's definitely when they get close to it, when they disturb it, is when this stuff starts happening.
I guess that's where the horror comes in, because Forbidden Planet, Water Pigeon's character, Dr. Morpheus or whatever, he kind of understands this thing's powerful and takes it on anyway.
Right.
Whereas this one, just like, again, it's just proximity and not intentional proximity, and it starts to affect you and sort of let the id go nuts. So
because the horrible thing about it too is that it's not like these locusts were alive and were doing these things to you. They're long dead. So there's just right. So looking at their horned antenna, Quatermass states the horned demons in the old prints. It's like a gargoyle. I mean, in fact, haven't you seen it carved in walls in a dozen countries? Isn't it in the depths of all our minds, a race memory? So here, much like in other movies, the real life, real world paranormal of theology, like demonology, is explained away as ancient cultural or race memories of having interacted with aliens.
Yep.
And then Dr. Ronys is leafing through an ancient book and says, got it. Look at this cave painting of 3,000 years ago, a man in a ritual mask. I wonder where he dreamed I wonder where he dreamed up the idea of that. And then he continues, I think these are old friends we haven't seen for a time. And Quatermass says, wait, instructor, point to low gravity environment, a thin atmosphere, perhaps a world that is dead now, but a few million years ago could have been teeming with life. I wonder, a name that's been nearly worn out before anything turned up to claim it. Was this really a Martian? And they're trying to figure out how the civilization could have come about in Mars, and then how they came to Earth. And on Earth they found the basic primates, and very much in keeping with 60s and 70s, there were already these kinds of ideas around, especially in occult circles, that then combined with the ufology circles, as they always do, like the Morning of the Magicians, which is then picked up by like Eric von Däniken and his ancient astronaut theory. And so all these things were really becoming popular back in those days.
Another strain, we keep talking about the mutants. I guess the 60s is also when the X-Men comic book was getting off the ground, just as an interesting one, with telekinesis and people being mutated by birth, not by an alien craft in that case, and hated and feared, and basically getting to the point. I know much later, Grant Morrison really got into the idea of writing X-Men, of the idea that the next step in evolution, basically just goes to kill the lesser step. In this case, the new alien mutated people are trying to off anyone else.
And Grant Morrison, by his own admission, he bridges that gap again and again and again between the occult and aliens and everything that comes after there, like the human mutants, right? Because Grant Morrison himself claims that he's possessed. And I mean, that's a story he tells about himself.
Yeah, I think that he was a sigil that has come to fruition or something.
Well, it's because he went to tantric rituals in India, and then he tells this whole story about how these entities basically possessed him, and so that's what he's been doing ever since. And now he's encouraging his prepubescent audience to engage in the occult rituals of Aleister Crowley and all this kind of stuff, where you think your kids are going to Comic-Con to look at comic books, and they're hearing lectures from Grant Morrison about engaging in occult rituals, basically, is what it comes down to. He's really done that. And if you remember, for when one of his comic books wasn't selling very well, he encouraged his readership to engage in what he called a wankathon. Which, okay, I mean, yeah, it's a funny thing, but when it comes to the kind of ritual magic he's doing, it's a very real and serious thing, because they believe that with that release of energy, then it puts this petition essentially out into the universe, and then the energy returns back to fulfill that intention and whatever. It's basically the typical ritual magic concept of will, having reality conform to one's will. That's basically what it comes down to, and he was encouraging his readership to do that for him and his sales.
I guess
nice Faustian bargain there.
Yeah, facing the universe as your rival, right? I need my own willpower to do it. Where I guess the other thing, which also you can use ritual for, is using the universe as your mirror, which is, I think, maybe in Star Wars, light side, dark side, right? All of that. It's all pretty archetypal in the end.
I just did a show on Star Wars the other day, and the person that hosts the program got in touch with me because I wrote an article called "Everything I Know About the Occult I've Learned from Star Wars." And yeah, it's full of all of that kind of stuff. But back to our tale. I did want to ask, in the notes, someone wrote "all-seeing eye poster," and I didn't know if you meant you found that within the movie or a poster of the movie.
No, it was one of the wall posters on the wall in the underground, I believe.
I'll have to take a second look at that.
I'm going by memory, but I want to say it was like a white poster with kind of a like orange, red, yellowish color with this deny, and I was like, oh, that's right behind the people talking. That's interesting.
Very good. I'll have to check that out.
And I mean, that could be, you could take that as like they're watching you, or you could take that as, your own all-seeing eye. I don't know what the
opening to the reality.
I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, it's some sort of like horrible thing. It's like, oh, someone put that there. So yeah, I don't know what their thoughts were, but
a deliberate choice. I didn't catch it either.
Okay. My thought of that, I would like to think of the third eye and the all-seeing eye as simply the eye to see reality with. But yeah, there is the very nefarious definition to that as well that comes up. So,
and then in the notes also, it says "Underground Ape Men" is a good name for your ironic punk, pop punk, and BND. Okay, band. Okay, so Underground Ape Men. There you go. Now. So the reason why that's in the notes is because what they start finding also around the craft
I think you got the film plan. Okay.
That was me.
Oh, he's looking for the all-seeing eye. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going. It's okay.
No, look for it.
And then always, Matt.
If you find it. Okay. So they start finding skulls and skeletons of what they call, they're your stereotypical ape men, but they seem to be different. Their skulls are different, and they theorize and figure out that the locusts were somehow manipulating the genetics of early human-like, ape-like life forms on Earth, and so that's what was going on there. And so,
right from the first time we see the ape men, they do have a very large skull.
Right,
almost more like a typical grey skull.
That's what I was looking at.
Oh, okay, it's almost like a flower. I wonder if I can share this with you. Give us a sec.
I think you can share a screen.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. This is what I was looking at.
So the poster on the right there.
Almost like a subconscious thing, because now that we're looking at it for a long time, sure, it's a flower, but at the same time, it's just I guess it's because it's the media here too, and just for some reason it stuck out in my mind.
Yeah, I can see it as an eye. At like a glance, definitely.
Speaking of media, I did find it interesting where there's a scene where Dr. Roney is speaking to the press and encouraging them essentially to tell his side of the story as to why they should be allowed to remain down there and stop the construction because there was more work for the scientists to do. And that's all well and good, but it did still strike me that it is media manipulation. He was literally telling them what stories to write.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's people like embedded reporters, like in conflicts or wars. They're,
right.
You know, it's sort of like if you're going to be embedded, you've got to play our game a little bit. We're not going to let you go out there and be like a maverick, man. You know.
I was hearing recently about how John McCain was his campaigns were always very successful because he would make a real effort to befriend all the reporters who reported on his campaign, and he was really warm to them and friendly to them. And once you're mates with the guy, you're not going to write a story about how he's terrible and you shouldn't vote for him.
That's the positive side of media.
That's what I'm saying. Media manipulation doesn't have to be incredibly, dark and the CIA threatening to blow up your family or whatever. But it's still manipulation, and it still is pretty shifty what they're up to.
Yeah, I mean, like with us, we're okay. Our sci-fi sanctuary here. We generally choose films that we're going to find something we enjoy. We did 1 month where we took films that we absolutely hated, and found out us liking a few things about some of them. Ready Player One accepting, but it's like that's our manipulation. We kind of want to talk positive about the stuff. Yeah, I don't really want to waste my time with something that I think's trash.
It's very difficult to give anything unbiased. Like, even just giving pure stats, choosing which stats to share is a bias.
Yeah.
Like, there is no unbiased media. It doesn't exist.
I mean, again, if you do a scientific, observation and you want to see it as a particle or a wave, you've just biased the science. Which I guess is why that's still a pretty wild experiment.
Now, another very in-your-face point made by the movie is when essentially it seems like it's all over with. They're just gonna bury everything back up and keep working on the underground, and everything's gonna be fine. Not. And then there's a worker down there who went down to get his tools late at night when no one else is around except someone guarding the front door, and this wind starts blowing out from the underground, but we find out it's not exactly normal wind because as he's running down the street freaking out, it starts following him, right? So this wind is almost like an entity, and it chases him, and he ends up running right through a graveyard, and he ends up being found by a priest, and by then he's like he's a mess, right? He's just out of his mind, essentially. And when Quatermass tracks him down, and what's her name, Miss Judy, is it?
Yeah, I think that was it, Barbara Judy.
Yeah. They're told by the priest. I felt sure he'd been in contact with spiritual evil. And the driller, that was the guy that had drilled into the craft originally, or attempted to. He states, I had to run to get away. They were coming, them. I remember it started when I could only see them. I'm sorry. I remember it started, and then I could only see them, like you found down there. The eyes, the horns, they were alive, hopping like very fast, hundreds and hundreds leaping, jumping in and out them big places, in and out of them. Oh, huge, right up into the sky. And so he was having these visions of the Locusts coming after him. So that's what's interesting, in that he ends up in a church for, I guess we call it solace. And of course, the priest is interpreting it theologically, and of course you can't say he was wrong for doing so, given that the movie has these correlations between aliens and what we would call the occult.
The end of that scene is one of the scenes which really established Quatermass's character, because the priest says like, "Oh, I suppose you've got some rational explanation," and Quatermass says, "Well, my explanation is that it is ancient evil that came after him." And that's what we were saying earlier about how he's skeptical but not cynical.
Yeah, he's
not going to shit on this priest's
source
idea
of the evil, but the fact that it's a problem is pretty clear. Let's not get into the details, except let's deal with the problem, maybe.
Oh, it's Miss Judd, by the way, Miss Judd. She says, "You said these faculties may be in all of us," which is really like a very typical claim that's made by occultists or New Agers, that these paranormal abilities are naturally in human beings and you just have to tap into them or develop them. And then she says, poltergeist outbreaks, second sight, they've been recorded the world over through the ages. Myths, magic, even witchcraft, perhaps, they all came from there. And she says, so as far as anybody is, we're the Martians now.
Mm.
Do we firmly establish that they are from Mars?
Well, a lot of the lore that we find out, Quatermass just comes to these conclusions really quickly, and everyone sticks with it.
I'm just, I think more and more the ufologists and stuff kind of like, some people are like, oh, more like an interdimensional thing, like they're from 2 feet above, that sort of idea. And I'm sitting here wondering if this ancient evil might actually be of Earth in a slightly different phase.
So now sometimes when I write movie reviews, I literally go step by step. So at times I'm kind of speculating and then something's either confirmed or not. So at one point I wrote, Quatermass says, "I wonder, a name that's been nearly worn out before anything turned up to claim it, was this really a Martian?" And so I wrote, "Why Martian specifically? Perhaps to hint at Wells and or, H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds, and or because Mars had long been viewed as close enough in terms of possible life supporting Earth-like planets."
Well, I think we have to remember this film was made in the 60s, and in early sci-fi, Martian was just the word you used for alien, right?
Right.
I mean, nowadays...
Like saying little green man.
Yeah. Nowadays, of course, you would say it came from a different solar system further away, whereas back in the day, you would usually just say Mars.
The shorthand.
But then also, Mars is the god of war, right? And the red planet. And later it gets into this idea that they deliberately put this urge to kill into us.
Right.
So that could be another deliberate illusion.
And as far as Locusts, it's a very, for me, it hints of the book of Revelation, chapter 9, where the abyss, the bottomless pit, is opened up. And these beings, who I interpret as fallen angels, but they're symbolically described variously. But one thing they're said to be is like locusts, right? So quite a number of them, and they're destructive. And so, because why locusts specifically? Why not any kind of other insect, or why an insect anyway within this movie?
Well, the other end of the Bible, we got the plague of locusts, right? Again, specifically locust with Moses and its the various plagues. So,
and then when eventually what happens is, as I mentioned before, a huge phantasm of one of these locusts, but looking almost like a typical gray alien, but with the little tiny antenna horns, and Dr. Ronys saying it's the devil, the horned devil. And Quatermass now trying to get him out of being captivated by it, says, don't look at it, right? And then they figure, Ronys says mass into energy, and Quatermass says the focus of all that's happening, the cause, oh God. So they're kind of realizing that this thing is actually becoming to be formed due to the energy, and the energy being put into it, such as like when you stare at it and you're giving this energy to it, that's why it's manifesting. So Ronys figures mass into energy, the fundamental law, it must be. Now this was interesting. What's the devil's what's the devil's enemy? It was iron. I'm not sure where he gets that, but that's what he said. It was iron. It might make sense if it were possible to project a massive metal into it. And so essentially they cause it to collapse by Ronny climbing atop a metal structure. What is it? A crane. And he comes into contact with it, and horrible things happen to him. Poor guy.
Yeah, I think in the serial he just throws a metal chain in the pit, but they wanted to be more cinematic.
I know fairies were weak to iron, was a thing.
Iron in folklore. That's what.
Oh, apparently it comes from an old story of the devil having a horseshoe nailed into his hoof.
Oh. And
yeah, so iron is said to repel the devil and supernatural creatures.
Well, I guess he's well read then.
Well, maybe it was better known in, 60s Britain than it is to us here today.
I mean, it was, if nothing else, then because we had already been told that Hob was a nickname for the devil. So they were already very early on in this movie hinting at the local folklore.
It makes me wonder at the end, because they were manifesting this devil, if the point all along was for to use human psychic energy to bring themselves back some way. If they'd let it continue, then the Martians would have just used us to be reborn.
I guess they came back as a weird phantasm at least. So give it another 20 minutes, who knows what it does.
Yeah.
But, and I think I alluded already, but just to shout out to his last 20 minutes, those are some of the most fantastic practical effects ever, I think.
Yeah, the stuff where the buildings are being smashed and stuff look great.
And just all those things waving through the air at various different. I mean, I guess they just have a bunch of people on the floor waving stuff.
I don't feel like I ever saw any strings or anything.
Yeah, it just looked cool. So I definitely appreciated all of that, and just very cool effects in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's pandemonium at that point, because even blocks away, people are being affected. And in fact, I got a kick out of how at one point there's patrons in a bar or a pub, okay, and and they're seeing footage from the Hobbs underground, and one of them says 3 streets away, and we're going to see it on the telly. I tell you, people don't believe nothing nowadays unless they see it on the telly.
What's happening? I better go check the news. Yeah, it's not real till I go and see it on the news, right?
Yeah.
If you recall, there's a point in which the craft, which has been essentially navy blue, I would say, all along, and just one single monochromatic, just one color, it starts to undulate.
Yeah, and it's this white light, and it has these
white light and a varicose vein.
Yeah.
And so something, again, it's not the aliens doing it because they're long dead. So what is it? It's apparently the artificial intelligence. We don't really know exactly, but that's the only thing that would make sense, that it's becoming activated. And it's almost like a vicious cycle where the more people that get transfixed by it, the more energy it gets, the more it puts out.
I can't help but think of the magical idea of the egregore, or the masses, or just if everyone believes something is true, that thing actually starts to take form. That's kind of what we're watching at the end of this.
Yeah, tulpa is another term for that.
Yeah.
And one of you wrote loud noises.
Oh yeah, I like to write that in my notes regularly.
I don't know what we're yelling about. Is that what you had in mind?
Yeah, exactly. No, just when I notice the movie's getting loud, I tend to write that down. I do these notes late night. It's 11:30. I'm having dinner. Got to sit on the train, and usually just spewing words onto the paper, onto the digital paper, I should say.
Yeah, I've quit even reading Matt's notes because they're mostly just madness at this point.
That's why I like that Ken spits them back at me, because I usually forget what I wrote.
Yeah. Sometimes I'd have his note and I'd just be like, Matt, what does this mean? And Matt doesn't have a clue what it means anymore.
Oh, yeah. That's as an author, the rare occasion that happens, man, that just bothers me. Okay, so one time I told my wife, I guess when I'm tired or sleepy, I shouldn't be writing editing notes on my books. because I had this note that said Yorn, not like the Icelandic Bjorn. I mean, Yorn. And that was a note I wrote to something, and I have no idea what it means. I just, no clue whatsoever. So that's just one of those mysteries in life.
I think it's
the mystery of Yorn.
Yeah. I think it's the atmospherics in Japan. Did you get this? Just everyone's super sleepy yesterday?
Yeah, it's when the weather changes. I always get
okay.
That.
I was going to say that our weather has been changing. We had hail the other day, and I do find that I seem to feel pretty fatigued when it gets overcast, especially when it's kind of unexpected.
I just had that uncomfortable moment where I'm standing, but somehow I'm giving a listening test, and I have like a quick micro nap, and I'm like, where am I? And all the students are like staring, like, what are you doing? I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I wasn't quite that sleepy, but
no, I just like, I think I was like, okay, read the thing. Okay, questions 1, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm like, what's happening? So, yeah.
You're just getting old, man. Your brain's
drying
out.
My brain's drying out.
You know what? In the movie Hangar 18, that comes up again. A character says, it's the dry desert air that does it. He says, does what? Drives up their brain juice so they can't think straight. But I found a part from the script when they're discussing how these events go way back. Okay, so they're reading a report about alarming noises and spectral appearances. September 1763, grievous sounds emanating from the very earth had severely frightened certain fellows employed in the digging of a well. That was one like to die. That one is like to die mad. Sorry, guys, I'm dyslexic, and sometimes I try to read out loud, and it just doesn't work very well. Ms. Jude notes, stories, wild rumors, they believed in those days, but she's told, I suppose it's possible for ghosts, let's use that word, to be phenomenal and were badly observed and wrongly explained. Okay, so then they read another report. One inhabitant of Hobbs Lane does assert that he often spied the apparition of a hideous goblin and won several, and that this place is long notorious for weird happenings. I love that line. Long notorious for weird happenings. And then they find a record in the archive of Westminster Abbey. In the winter of the year 1341, the religious of that region did strive against an outbreak of evil at Hobbs Lane. Imps and demons did appear. Foul noises sent by the devil did solely afflict the charcoal burners that had lately come there. Interesting, okay? Charcoal burners, obviously talking about spacecraft contextually, right? That's how they would have interpreted that. So it's really interesting that they're poring over these. They've been felling trees, big ones. In 1763, a well was being dug. In 1927, the underground station, and now the extinction, all disturbances at the ground. So that's when they figure out this has been going on for centuries, but no one ever really knew why, what was going on.
Yeah, it depends on whatever you're coming in with, what you're going to observe, if it's that strange. I mean, again, people today are going to see UFOs and aliens if this sort of thing happens. And I guess that's where this film's kind of interesting. It's very much on the line of where people would be like, it's Satan and it's an alien. In the 60s.
Yeah, if this happened 20 years earlier, everyone's assumption would be, oh, it's Satan, it's the devil. 20 years later, everyone's assumption would be, it's aliens, it's a space thing. This is that one moment in time where both sort of fields of belief would have been commonplace.
Right. That's what I was saying is this movie kind of blurs the line because of that discussion, particularly that really short discussion between the priest and Quatermass, where they're coming to this agreement, just using different terms.
Yeah.
So before we completely tie a bow around things, I guess we should just take a moment to give a quick comparison with this and Doctor Who. There's definitely some wiggle room. This one gets a lot more of the occult vibe, I think. Although I guess Doctor Who still has that. Yeah,
occulty Doctor Who episodes.
Yeah, and Doctor Who is less grounded in science, way less grounded in science. So yeah, that's kind of interesting.
I guess it's difficult based on just this is the only Quatermass I've seen so far. Whereas the impression I get is if you watch all of it, it is a very Doctor Who feel, where it's a different adventure each week. The only really recurring thing is that Quatermass is there, and it also every now and then in Doctor Who you'll get the story where the Doctor didn't really do anything in this one, everyone else solved it, and really the Quatermass identifies that it's aliens pretty early on. But he gets taken in by the psychic thing that's going on, and it's Dr. Rooney who actually solves it.
That's why he's top billing.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a better movie than Doctor Who and the Daleks. I'll give that easily.
Yeah.
Now let me read a quote here about why Colonel Brean was adamant about blaming the Germans. So this is an actual explanation about the actual script and what it's about. Now there's a reference to a post-war writer for whom the war has never gone away. Quote, "This is whom you should really be interviewing," he says, indicating a shelf of books by his wife. Sorry, this is the script writer, okay. The writer and illustrator Judith Kerr, who fled Hitler's Berlin and grew up in a British internment camp for friendly aliens. Her 1971 book, When Hitler Stole a Pink Rabbit, was one of the first popular narratives of life under the Nazis. That, he says, is what Quatermass and the Pit is really about.
Well, I definitely made the connection that here's a film. Well, the story would have originally been in the 1950s, and it deals with, mass killings and ethnic cleansing, which obviously was something that had very recently entered the public consciousness in a big way. And I think it was something that people were really struggling to make sense of. So maybe the idea that Martians put it in our brains would help you sleep at night a little better.
So that's what's interesting is when you end up watching this fantastic sci-fi tale about aliens and the occult, and then you go maybe a level deeper, and what was that all about? Well, it's about genetics, it's about racial cleansing, it's about occult powers, and then you end up learning behind it all is really this concept of Nazis dropping bomb of your city, causing devastation that lasts for decades, and like you said, genocide and all these concepts that a scriptwriter had in their mind, and that you would maybe never even guess if it had not been revealed, right?
That's where the context is for kings.
Yeah, well, right at the start, I mean, the first thing they assume is it's a German bomb from the Blitz.
Which is a reasonable assumption.
Yeah, I'm sure they're probably, I think there were still a few knocking around London until within my lifetime.
There's probably a few knocking around London.
Yeah, they're probably still selling there now.
I know.
They dropped a hell of a lot of bombs, so there's going to be quite a few that didn't go off.
Yeah. Yeah, where you drop bombs, yeah.
Okay, now, if you can see the chat, I'm putting a name there because that's the one I totally skipped over. I said an author.
Oh, the writer, yeah.
If you could pronounce that last name.
I would guess just Nigel Neal.
Okay, Nigel Neal.
I'm assuming it's a silent K. But...
Okay, so Nigel Neal in 1960 wrote the book Quatermass and the Pit.
Oh, wow. Oh, so the book was after at least the TV one.
Well, yeah, I don't recall when the TV one was made.
59, so they probably did the TV show and then novelized it, most likely.
I know that happened a lot with Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So then it was Nigel Neal, who is the post-war writer for whom the war has never gone away, and he's the one who said that to look at his wife and what she wrote, and that's who I was talking about.
Okay.
But I'm glad I did that because I just caught that in my review I mentioned Neil without bothering to say who he was.
Okay.
That's why I got stuck on that. So now at least I can go back and edit that.
Right.
Nigel Neal, yeah.
So we're wrapping up pretty much. Are there any other big concepts we want to hit on this? I think we definitely hit the occult button nicely.
The occult button and the ancient alien stuff was the main thing.
I think this, a year ago we were trying to do Total Recall, and this is probably what we were trying to do then. So yeah, more or less.
Which Total Recall?
We were doing the Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
You know how people always talk about being red pilled?
Yeah.
Is that, yeah, well, that most people think it started with the Matrix, but it's in Total Recall first.
Oh yeah.
Right, because he's in the delusion. He's offered a blue or a red pill. The blue one will take the blue one will keep you in the delusion. The red one will take you back into your real life. And they picked up on that for the Matrix. With the same
but the Matrix
concept.
should have come up with the third option of just shoot the guy in between the eyes.
That's why the Matrix didn't have Schwarzenegger, did it?
Yeah, very different film.
Anyway, can you tell everyone about the book you're working on?
Well, at the moment, I think I'm due to publish volume 3 of the movies reviewing alien and UFO movies. The book reviewing those movies with those themes in it. And I don't even remember what number 3 has in it. I would have to look because I'm kind of just compiling them as I go along. In other words, I've written a ton of movie reviews. And then when I see maybe 2 movies that would seem to kind of go together, I turn them into one of the volumes because I'm trying to keep each one short.
Right.
And so I'm not technically working on a book right now. I'm just kind of putting together my reviews. So for instance, a lot of the quotes I was reading tonight is from my review. So Quatermass is definitely going into combined with another one that is just, again, typically the occult and the alien angle are just like that.
All right. Yeah, I talked to Charlie Robinson a few weeks ago. He said he wrote Contact for your book and then realized after he wrote the review that there are no actual aliens in that movie. And I don't know, it's the alien's his dad. They called it on South Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Because you don't know what the aliens are. They just kind of manifest as something they pull out of your memory, like a fond memory, like the protagonist's father, right? The alien shows up looking like him. So again, it's one of those things where you don't really get to know what they're like or what they look like. And it kind of falls into an infinite regress type of situation because the reason they're able to go and interact with the aliens, and I'm actually not sure why they had to traverse the universe to interact with a delusion or an illusion, right? But whatever. And so they're asked, well, how did you build this technology to get us basically through a wormhole? And they're like, we didn't do it. It was here long before. They're like, oh, thanks for nothing. You know, you don't even know. So it's just like this infinite regress. Aliens before us did it, and before them, and who knows? It's kind of like in this Quatermass in the Pit. Where did the Martian life come from? We don't really know. Apparently, it just sort of happened. And there was a note that you wrote about panspermia. And of course, there's the concept of directed panspermia and undirected panspermia, right? One is purposeful and one is not. So,
just to clarify, directed panspermia is not the Grant Morrison thing.
Right.
Well, actually, it is. It's not panspermia. Grant Morrison's was directed, specific,
spermia, yeah.
goal-oriented.
No pan. Okay, there we go.
I mean, you can use a pan if you don't have a tissue.
Grant Morrison didn't give you that much advice. He should have. Maybe in a lecture. Okay.
I should stop there.
And Ken, your website is still truefreethinker.com, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry, I just didn't want to not say that before.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Luke, tell them where we're at.
You can find this podcast on Twitter at MLSFSPod. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, blah, blah, blah. Just search Matt and Luke's Sci-Fi Sanctuary. And if you want to help keep it online and keep us paying for the Pro Zoom and all of that good stuff, then you can go to patreon.com/podcastios.
And we are putting some early stuff up there now. My other podcast here, I just throw the raw audio of this before I edit there. So if you do the Patreon, you can get stuff earlier for now.
And maybe you can hear the awful offensive things that I say that Matt has to cut.
Okay, Ken, as always, it's been jolly chatting with you. So thanks for spending your evening in the sanctuary.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we got to go to work in a minute. So.
Anyway, we're drill down the door of this sanctuary and find some decomposing locust aliens. So later's y'all.
All right, thanks so much.